During World War I, far from any kitchen or comfort, British soldiers on the Western Front learned a new meaning for the word meal. In the damp trenches of France and Belgium, food was not pleasure, it was survival. The air was heavy with mud and cordite, and yet, amid the chaos, came the faint smell of tinned meat warming over a tiny flame. A soldier once wrote that "you should have seen the scramble, the good old potato pie want some beating." It wasn't much, just preserved beef mashed with potatoes and onions. But in a place where time and warmth were both scarce, that was enough to remind them of home. This is the story of what it meant to eat and endure in the trenches of the Great War. When the war began in August 1914, Britain was not ready. Hundreds of thousands of young men, many still under 19, rushed to enlist. They carried rifles, uniforms, and very little idea of how to feed themselves. The army had to turn some of them into cooks quickly. Before the war, training at the Army School of Cookery took 4 months. Once the fighting started, that time dropped to barely 2 weeks. Most of it spent teaching hygiene and how not to poison your unit. Their kitchens were improvised, horse-drawn stoves fueled by wood, coal, or oil. Each Loon Valley field kitchen could cook for 250 men a day, with giant 20-gallon boilers and ovens bolted to wagons. Meals traveled along the supply lines, hundreds of yards behind the front, where it was slightly safer, though even there shells sometimes fell. By midnight, a hot supper was carried forward, through the mud, through the dark, to the waiting men. It wasn't gourmet cooking, but it was warm, and that mattered. Most days the rations were the same, bully beef and biscuits. That was canned corned beef and hardtack, the Army biscuit No. 4, made by Huntley and Palmer's. Flour, water, salt, sometimes a little sugar. So hard it had to be cracked with a rock before eating. Those biscuits had fed armies for 2,000 years in one form or another. Now they scraped against the teeth of another generation. A soldier joked that even the goat mascot of the Canadian battalion refused to eat them. But some men didn't complain. Back home, meat once or twice a week was luxury. A daily ration, even canned, was a step up. To many, the trenches offered more food than poverty ever had. Still, monotony dulls even hunger. Each day blurred into the next. Salty beef, dry biscuit, tea brewed in tins blackened by fire. And yet, when hot food finally reached them, perhaps a stew, perhaps mashed potatoes, it was a feast. As one private from the Cheshire Regiment wrote in 1915, "We shot a young steer that strayed near the trenches. In less than 2 hours we were having fried steak, with the Germans 200 yards away." It was madness and a small miracle. Cooking at the front was an act of ingenuity. Some soldiers learned to build mess tin stoves, stacking their metal tins to make a tiny cave of fire. They fed the flames with bits of sandbags soaked in lamp oil, even though those same sandbags were meant to stop bullets. Later, the Army issued Tommy cookers, miniature stoves with solid fuel tablets that burned for 15 minutes, waterproof and windproof. For the first time, a soldier could heat his own rations, alone at the edge of the world. It wasn't always successful. One night, after 5 days without tea, the cooks finally brewed a batch. But in the darkness, someone had poured salt instead of sugar. The men drank it anyway. Tea, even ruined, was still comfort. Not all cooks were careful. A man from the 22nd Field Ambulance recalled that his pudding had been wrapped in a towel used to wipe the patient's feet. The cook swore he had washed it. No one believed him, but everyone ate. Food became a kind of faith, a fragile ritual that held the men together. Each bite was proof that life continued. Some of the strangest stories came from the smallest things. The tins of Tickler's plum and apple jam were so common that their empties became weapons. Filled with shrapnel and resin, they were refashioned into jam tin bombs. Necessity had turned dessert into defense. And yet, sweetness still mattered. Jam, tea, a spoonful of sugar, these were reminders of civilization. At Christmas, families sent boiled puddings in bars of chocolate from home. In 1914, the city of York mailed a tin of chocolate to every soldier from the area. One gunner, Henry Bailey, wrote back to thank them. "I am proud to be a York lad, and I shall prize the box as long as God spares me." Those gestures meant more than flavor. They carried warmth across the channel, through mud and fear, to the hands of men who had forgotten what peace smelled like. Even condiments held memory. HP sauce, a tangy brown blend of malt vinegar and spice, became a favorite at the front. Soldiers put it on everything: bully beef, potatoes, even biscuits. A drop of home in every meal. In those trenches, food was never just food. It was warmth in a frozen night, laughter over a ruined pudding, the scrape of tin against stone. It was proof that somewhere, beyond the mud, life still had flavor. When the guns fell silent, many of those men never spoke much about the war. But some kept their habits: a tin of beef in the cupboard, a bottle of HP sauce on the table, tea brewed strong, small echoes of a life suspended between hunger and hope. The potato pie may have disappeared, the biscuits long turned to dust, but the memory of those meals, simple, improvised, stubbornly human, still lingers, like steam rising from a cup of tea on a cold morning.